Live from Hollywood, California, it's the Nighttime Show! With us, as always, our head writer, Matt Walker. I'm the voice of the Nighttime Show, Mike Black. Today, we welcome the revolutionary comic book artist who created Venom, Spawn, and is the founder of Image Comics. Not to mention, he did one badass Kickstarter, Todd McFarlane! And now, the host of the Nighttime Show. He's so full of necroplasm that his eyes are green, Stephen Kramer Glickman!
Facts are facts. Mike Black is back. This is so exciting. Todd McFarlane, thank you so much for being here.
Sure. Thanks for giving me the time today, gentlemen.
Of course, of course. It's an absolute honor. I mean, we all have your comic books and stuff that you've worked on. Your artwork throughout the years and has just completely changed comic books time and time again. It's really an awesome. It's an honor, man. It really is.
Yeah.
I wanted to start off by talking to you about where you grew up. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Canada, but at an early age, about 5, Dad decided he was going to go look for work elsewhere, so he took us to California. So
Wow.
I spent my formative years in California, both in the Orange County area and the San Jose area this is how old I am, pre-Silicon Valley.
That's actually very similar to me. I'm from London, Ontario, and my family moved to California when I was about 5 years old, about 6 years old.
Yeah, so I was in, again, the early 60s and mid-60s, and then at the age of 14, moved back up to my hometown, Calgary, Alberta, up in Canada, and quickly found that all the kids there had been playing hockey since they were 5, and I was a summer sport kid. So, I became one of the sort of best ball players in town because they were like, "Oh my God, the California kid!" and it was very easy when you're 14. Let me just tell you, when they say, "Hey, Todd, you got a choice. You're 14. You can either play baseball," and none of us play baseball here because it's cold, and you're awesome because you're from California. Yeah. Or you can play hockey, and these kids have been playing for 8 years, and you'll barely be able to carry the puck back. Yeah. So life gets very clear at 14 with those options. So I stayed.
Played to your strengths.
I stayed into the sports, and then after high school, I stayed up in Canada for high school, and then came down to the States on a baseball scholarship. Played Pac-10 baseball, and near the end of that, got 3 weeks before I graduated college, ended up getting my first job at Marvel Comics.
What school did you play at in the Pac-10?
It was a small school called Eastern Washington, just outside of Spokane. Okay. At that point, it used to be called the NORPAC, but they amalgamated the North and the South, never changed the number. But that division was our school, Eastern, Gonzaga, Washington State, University of Washington, Portland State, Oregon State. That was the North.
Very cool.
What type of work did your parents do?
My dad was in the printing business, so he just moved. I mean, we moved constantly. So I think it wasn't until I was in grade 10 and 10 and 11 that I ended at one school and started the same school for the first time in my life. So
wow.
He was a bit of a gypsy, so I did the same thing once I got older.
That's cool.
Yeah. Now, like as a multi-hyphenate talented person, I know that you started drawing at a young age. When do you remember like people seeing your stuff and going, "Oh, this is like you've got something here. This is talent."
It's interesting because I remember, my memories probably go back to kindergarten, but I won an award. My mom still saved the pamphlet, the program book. I got selected for my artwork. They were picking like kids from all grades. I was living in the Orange County area, so even at 5, somewhere that art was starting to spring forward. I remember I painted this picture of a baseball player. It ended up winning, for kindergarten, and then they put it up at the Angel Stadium, and it was
Wow.
My dad goes, "You want to go see your artwork?" And that was the first base. So it was what I went to go see my artwork, and it was the first baseball game I ever saw. So
Oh, cool.
Man.
it was art and baseball at the same time. So,
Oh my God.
That must have been amazing.
oh, look, when you're watching black and white sports on a TV, and you get to see a game for the first time with your own eyes,
Yeah.
and the vivid colors of a stadium, and the green, how glowing it is, and the white of the uniforms are almost blinding. It was,
Yeah.
it was magic to me. I remember that day.
Just walking into a stadium for the first time and being like,
Yep.
someone built this. You know,
Yeah.
people made this thing that we're in, this amazing thing, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when did it start to become like, I want to do this professionally?
So fast forward from kindergarten, I become a doodler, if you will, and that kid, that best artist in the class kid, right?
Yeah.
So that was me all the way through many years, and then it was pretty late. I was probably about 16 when I bought my first comic book. I mean, I probably had a few in my hands up prior to then because I had brothers, and I'm sure my mom and dad.
Do you remember what the first one was that you bought?
That I bought?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I went into a corner store. I was up in Canada at that point. It was Amazing Spider-Man 167, Doctor Strange 23, Hulk 214, and Avengers 157. So there was a spinner rack. I mean, back then they didn't have comic stores, so you just had the spinner rack.
Yeah.
So the store had 2-3 months worth of some of the titles. So I bought 5, 6. Marvel Tales, which was a reprint, so I felt a little bit sort of burnt on those ones where it's like, what? Great cover, but this is like old stuff.
Yes.
But I went home.
I fell
read
for
them
that
all.
also.
Yeah, I read them all, and then I went back the next day and started buying more, and it just became an obsession. So what I ended up doing at that point was, sort of falling for comic books and then saying, hey, why don't I just hone my skills? Because at that point it was all over the place. I didn't have any particular style.
Right.
Why don't I teach myself this thing called American superhero comic book drawing? And so I started doing that from about the age of 16 up. My mom and dad one Christmas bought me the greatest gift they ever could have given me, which was, I said, hey, I like comic books. I want to learn to draw. And they bought me a drafting table so I could draw at a table.
Oh, that's cool.
And I used that table till I was about 40 years old, the same table. Every page of Spider-Man,
Wow.
everything was drawn on it. So again, where some parents go, an artist, why don't you become an accountant and get a real job?
So that thing's kind of like the Stan Lee typewriter that he had.
Yeah, that's it. Because again, it's sort of like saying it was effortless, and I don't think mom and dad understood how impactful that was. It was sort of like me saying, hey, I want to play baseball, and they got me a glove, right? I mean, you needed the tool. And for me, it was, I needed a table to draw it.
But
so
my God,
they provided it.
That kind of support too. Having
that's really cool.
Having parents support something, even in even just buying you the table that it turned out to be able to give you the belief and the that there is some. You've got people behind you. It's you're not just on your own.
The thing is, I would take that support, and it doesn't even have to be for people like myself who ended up wanting to get a career. I think it's just the support of your kids almost in anything you do, but especially I've seen it before with geekdom, right? And and so there was one, I'll give you one story. I was up in Toronto, and Amazing Spider-Man 300 had come out. So it was sort of a big deal. It was an anniversary book at that point. And the lines were pretty long. And again, back then there was no cell phones. So the show was supposed to end at 5, but there was a big lineup, and I try to make sure that everybody who's in line always gets an autograph. So I stayed longer to do it.
That's very
and
cool.
This kid came up to me about 10 or 11, and he sort of hands me, handshaking his, mint condition of Spider-Man 300. and I sign it for him. And just as I sign it for him, I hear somebody sort of screaming in the background going, Jimmy, where the hell are you? Where the hell are you? And she comes running up and she goes, I've been waiting outside on the curb. You said you were going to be out at 5, right? But again, there was no cell phone to say, hey, I'm going to be an extra half an hour.
Yeah.
But he'd been in line for a couple hours and he wanted his book signed. So I had just finished signing it, and she grabbed the book and folded it twice. I didn't know you could fold a comic book twice. Folded it once,
No.
twice, and then shoved it in her purse and goes, get to the car. And the kid burst into tears and left.
God.
And Mom doesn't even know in that moment. Obviously, she was put off for half an hour, but she doesn't know that she crushed that kid, and to somewhere along the line, there is sort of an origin to all serial killers, right? I just go, Mom, you don't know what you do. So now when I'm at shows and I see parents in line with their kids, and they're just saying, yeah, I'm here because my kid wants to be here, and they've got a smile on their face. I always applaud them, because I don't think you know sort of how important it is that you're not making fun or making light or making them feel bad because they want to collect or they have some goofy hobby, right?
Yeah.
Let them be. Just let them have their personality.
Yeah, and back then there was much more of a stigma to it,
Oh, yeah.
And
everything
was basically a Star Trek convention,
Yeah, back then it was the whole, Trekkies, right?
Right,
right.
That you had the fans there. So, and I've had plenty of interviews where back then and even today where sometimes the reporter will go, what's the silliest question, the weirdest question, one, and my answer is always the same, but it's like I've never had that question. Here's why: if it's important for the human being in front of me to ask the question, it's important enough for me to answer it, right? So even though it may seem silly to you, who's stronger, Thor or the Hulk? It's important to that person that they asked it, right? So I owe them the dignity of giving them as sort of good an answer as I can give it. Because why? Because every person standing in front of me has at some point in their life supported some of the product that I've done, which basically means they've given me some of their money. And then it's allowed me to have a career and put food on the table and have a good life, right? So there's nothing any fan could do that could bother me. As a matter of fact, it's actually the opposite. I'm thankful to them. Right?
Well, we're actually going to challenge that right now with a section we like to call "Stupid Questions." No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding.
But since you mentioned it, Thor or the Hulk, who would it be? I'm just.
Who would win?
Yeah.
Usually they're asking me like I got Spawn, and Spawn wins every fight, so I'm biased.
You know who would win? That woman who folded a comic book over twice. Like that's really that was She-Hulk right there, being able to do that.
Yeah. Come on. Yes. Come on. I like it.
That is brutal.
That moment was burnt in my mind with that kid.
That would be traumatic.
They just got crushed. She crushed her kid's soul. Like, come on, parents. You're supposed to do the opposite.
Man.
You're supposed to do the opposite. You're supposed to uplift your children, not crush them.
What's funny is I saw almost the opposite of that at Comic-Con 2 years ago. I saw a bunch of young kids, like they just looked lost, and the security was talking to them, and they were like, look, we can't find our dad. He's dressed like Captain America. Can you please help us find him? And so they're like, we're on the lookout. And I just happened to see a Captain America like one block later, and I was like, do you have a couple of kids? And he was like, yeah, I do. And it's like, they're looking for you. You want to go back that
way? Wow, because usually you got like a dozen, if not more, Captain Americas running around.
Right. I was like, I'm just going to take the gamble on this guy because he looks kind of lost too.
That might have been the year when everybody was Fat Thor. So
it's possible.
The other thing that I do sometimes is like you get the young parents will get in line, and sometimes, unfortunately, the line can get kind of long and it's a little bit boring and dreadful. And then they've got their young children with them, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that by the time they get to me, their kids are just completely out of the game, right? They're like, it's like waiting in a stupid long line at Disneyland, but there's no teacup at the end of it, right?
It's a guy.
So, yeah, there's a dude here. And so they sit there. So I sometimes I do this thing where, I mean, some of them are a little bit older and they say, hey, this is a guy who drew Spider-Man and he did Venom. And sometimes they'll perk up.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's like, they're young enough that I go, nah, not even the Spider-Man thing's going to work. So I usually ask them like, hey, what's your favorite show? What do you like to watch on TV? And no matter what their answer is, I always tell them I'm the inventor of it. I created it.
That's smart.
So then their eyes perk up, and then they'll say, yeah, I like the Teletubbies or whatever. I'm making it up. Or I like Frozen or whatever. I'm going, oh, yeah, I invented it. And then I'm good enough of an artist that I can almost fake anything. Right? So I take a little piece of paper and I do a little bad drawing of one of the characters of whatever show it is. Or I have to use my phone real quick if it's an obscure thing. And then I do a little drawing for it, and then I give it to the kid. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, their eyes are wide open, and you could see they slap their parents, going, "Oh my God! Why didn't you tell me he was the creator?" I thought we were in line this whole time, and I've been complaining. And it's like, "Mom, Dad, this is ridiculous. You should have told me." And then you can see the parents as we're walking away give me that wink, like, "Thank you. This will make it manageable for the rest of the day."
Oh, man. So now I want you to release a book of things that you didn't create but told kids that you did. Because I bet that artwork is amazing.
Yeah, I've got lots of them.
And have you ever waited in a long line for somebody? Like when you were younger? Like, is that something you ever did?
No, you know what? I never did. I mean, I went to San Diego Comic-Con years and years ago, right before I broke in. Mm-hmm. So that would have been the mid-'80s. Yeah. Trying to, show my portfolio. So I wasn't there to get autographs. Yeah. I don't even remember that being a thing. But I do remember, going there, and there was one huge line for showing your portfolio to see if you could get some tips and maybe they'd hire you on the spot or whatever.
Yeah.
And a guy named Jim Shooter, who at that time was editor-in-chief at Marvel, was looking at people's portfolio, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And he was only going to be there for like 2 hours or something. And I could see this line. By the time you give 10 minutes to every person, I was never going to get there. And I was looking at the kids around me, and they were way better than me too. Mm-hmm. And I go, even if I get there, I'm not as good as them. So you always have to come up with a backup plan. And that one was, what's plan B? And plan B was that you can count on one thing that every human being has to do, and that's breathe and go to the bathroom. And so yes. I waited for Jim Shooter, to have to take a potty break, and then I just followed him in. I pretended to sort of take a pee and shake it, and then when he went to wash his hands, I went to wash my hands, and then as he's leaving, I'm going, "Hey, Mr. Shooter, I've got my portfolio. Mind if you look at it?" Uh-huh. And he could have just said, "Hey, I'm doing it right now. Get back in line." But he stopped and he gave me his 5-minute spiel and gave me a bunch of pointers. He didn't hire me or anything. I didn't get a job, so that's not the end. But he gave me enough information that the next time I came back or the next time I handed my samples in, they just got that much better, and eventually I ended up getting a job. So, at some point, you have to advocate for yourself, right? I mean, I've met a lot of people, and they're very shy, and they're like, well, I don't know if I can do that. And I mean, life can be kind of simple. Like, if you don't give a shit about yourself, nobody else cares more about you than you, right? So when you wake up in the morning, there is no human being, there's 8 billion of us, there's no human being that wakes up that cares about your life more than you. I don't care, even your mom. Your mom has to make sure she's healthy and wise and everything's going good before she can take care of the kids, right? So she has to make sure that number one is taken care of first, and then you. So if you don't have the personality to advocate and show your stuff, then here's what's going to happen. Those of us, myself included, that are less talented, perhaps, and have less skill, but are hustling,
Yeah.
We're going to get the job. We're going to get the job over you, right? I've said before plenty of times, if you're in a room with 8 other artists, myself included, and I'm the worst artist out of eight people in the room, I can get the job. And you know how I get the job? Because I'm the only one that raises his hand when they ask for the work. So if people don't want to just figure out how to get there, then I'm always the guy that's basically, you know, raising his hand. I keep saying I'm Donkey and Shrek. Like, pick me, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, Shrek didn't want him, right? Of all the people, he didn't want him.
Right.
But he was the only one that said, "I'll go with you on this adventure." So, okay, you don't have to be the best. You just have to be confident. That's half the battle.
And Steven was Shrek.
That's true. I was. I was.
On Broadway. Yeah.
Back in the day.
Right, see?
Yeah, see, you gotta step forward always. When you were submitting yourself to Marvel and to different comic book companies, I heard that you would pick kind of abstract characters, not characters that you weren't picking like the most famous character that they have. You were picking like side characters and submitting artwork that way. Was that a helpful, you know, move to get hired?
I thought it was, and here's what the abstract for people listening. What basically less popular characters, and here's why I chose that, because if you looked at the top books, the most popular books, they had the best artists on them. So even if I could draw those characters, there was never any way that I was going to basically bump that person off that book,
right?
Especially as an amateur. So what I did was, given that I collected all the books, is that as much as the top selling books and the best artists were inspirational, and they basically gave me a lot of momentum, saying, yeah, someday it'd be cool if I could sort of be good like them. The guys who gave me the most enthusiasm were the ones that I thought weren't good on the mediocre books that weren't selling. So I would a lot of times take those characters and make the drawings of those and send them to the editors of those books in hopes that maybe they go, hey, I've got a mediocre artist. Here's an amateur mediocre artist. You know what? Maybe if the guy gets behind his deadline, I'll give the guy a job. And it took about 3 years, and I sent out about 700 samples, you know, and got about almost 300 rejection letters. And then eventually somebody sort of gave a phone call and said, hey, you know, and at that point, I'm guessing I had a bit of a reputation at the company, because I was sending in like 12 samples, because they had about 12 editors. So I sent one to every editor every month, like clockwork. So I think they just went, hey, it's that kid, that Canadian kid's giving us 12 more packages again. Somebody, for the love of God, give him a job and get him out of our hair, so we only get one. So they started me on some obscure book.
What do you remember? Do you remember what the obscure book was, or what some of the?
You're asking me. It's like asking an athlete. Do you remember your first at bat?
Yeah, I know. Probably.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do.
Yeah. Okay.
So the like, because it's the moment. Yeah. So it was a book that was at that point, Marvel had a side set of books coming from what they call the Epic line, and there was some kind of sort of ownership on those ones or something. It was a weird thing. But there was a book called Steve Englehart's Coyote. Steve Englehart had been doing, the Avengers and some other books as a writer, but he had created this book called Coyote. And all of a sudden I got a phone call, and what happened is I had sent my sample to the X-Men editor, because I sent it to everybody, and then she sent it to the editor at Epic, and the Epic editor turned to Steve Englehart and said, hey, you know how you need somebody on that 10-page backup story? Take a look at these. And I happened to have done some Coyote samples, because I didn't think the guy doing them at the time was very good, right?
Oh, wow.
So it actually ended up working. That he saw it in Steve's phone and said, hey, I don't need anybody on Coyote, because I've got an artist, but I've got this 10-page backup. You want to jump on that? And that was it. That was my first gig. 10 page backup at $60 a page.
How were you supporting yourself during this time when you're sending in all these submissions? What were you doing besides drawing things to submit?
So I was a ball player, so I went through to school. I played Pac-10 baseball. I was on a baseball scholarship. So between baseball practice twice a day, going to school.
So this is just college.
Part of the scholarship. I was working as a janitor on campus. And when I had the chance on the weekends, I'd go into Spokane and worked at a comic shop. So I was going to school and getting a degree and sending off samples. So and doing my comic book drawings from about midnight to 2 a.m. every night, and sending it all off. And then eventually, after 3 years of doing that, 3 weeks before I graduated college, I got the offer. So although I do have a college degree, I never ended up having to use it. I was going to go in and become a graphic designer. Like I thought I'd be doing Michelin tire ads, that's what I was going to do, be a graphic artist. But I ended up jumping into the comic books a little bit sooner than I thought.
That's so awesome. Hey, Mike, you know what time it is?
What time is it?
It's time for a Neft Vodka moment. At Neft Vodka, they say, life is a story, make it a good one. And the Nighttime Show podcast is all about good stories. One of my favorite storytellers we've had on the show, this amazing guy, movie producer, Michael Uslan. You remember?
Oh, yeah, that guy was great. He was so upset when he saw the Batman and Robin campy 60s Adam West TV show that he saved up all of his money and bought the rights to Batman. And now he produces every single Batman movie that comes out.
Yeah, we're talking Joker, Justice League, Suicide Squad,
The Dark Knight. If it's got pointy ears, he's getting a piece of it.
You bet. And it's a great way to celebrate owning the rights to the Batman film franchise.
What would that be?
Having a Neft Vodka Martini. Just go to buyneftvvodka.com and go pick up some Neft Vodka. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's the best vodka out there. Go to buyneftvvodka.com. That's buyneftvvodka.com. It comes in an unbreakable barrel, and it keeps the vodka cold 6 hours after it's come out of the refrigerator. Go to buyneftvvodka.com, buyneftvvodka.com. All right, let's get back to the show. Now, once you got over to Marvel, who are some of the people that you're running into? Like, it's got to be like fantasy camp, being there at being a fan and then suddenly being right in the middle of it. What was that like?
Well, by that point, things like FedEx were becoming sort of the norm. And what it allowed was you could live almost anywhere and send it in. So it used to be you had to be in the New York area, right? So at this point, I'm breaking into Marvel. I'm still living up in the state of Washington, which is as far away as you can get from New York City. But once a year we'd trek down to San Diego Comic-Con, which was not at the convention center at this point. It was still in the hotels downtown, right? So I'm going way back in the time machine.
Yeah.
But I do remember going to my first dinner as a quote-unquote professional and sitting at this table. We went out for dinner in Old Town, one of the Mexican places, and sitting there with like Ralph Macchio, he was an editor, and Archie Goodwin, who was a writer-editor, and Jim Shooter at that point was there. Steve Englehart was there.
Wow.
So, to me, these were some of the royalty of comic books writing. And so just to be sitting with them, it's like a big deal. A little bit later, I would meet some of the sort of the legends of on the artistic side. That I collected, both sort of the newer ones and then some of the old sort of vets that were there. Amongst them, Jack Kirby, who they called the King. That was the Elvis Presley, literally, of our business.
What was he like?
An old, sweet, gentle, kind man who, when you think about the number of pages he drew, it's just staggering. I mean, because the occupation of an artist is they give you a blank piece of paper, and then you have to sort of go into your brain, and then you have to fill that page, and you do it. And sometimes you can do it in 4 hours, and sometimes it takes you 2 days. And you fill the page, and the moment you fill the page, they take it away and they give you another blank page, and then you fill that, and you take it away, and you keep doing that either until you retire or you die, right? So like the tens of thousands of pages that Jack Kirby had, it was amazing. So now fast forward, I'll give you a Jack Kirby story.
Please.
Now fast forward, I'm in comics, I've made my name and reputation, whatever else. Somebody phones up and says, "Hey, we're doing a book, and Jack's writing it and doing some covers. We wondered if you wanted to ink it." And I'm like, "What? You want to know if I want to ink over Jack Kirby's artwork?" Yeah. And I'd been in, what are you talking about? I've been in the art business now for 10, 12 years. I've won all the awards, and sales and but it's like, oh my gosh, I get to ink Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
So I inked this page, and the process is that somebody gives you the page, it's pencils. I put ink on it so it's permanent. That's what they are going to print, and then you have to erase the page so it's a clean page so they can print it. And I remember erasing that page, and looking at the shavings and sitting there going, oh my God, those are Jack Kirby's pencils. I just erased Jack Kirby's pencils. Like, it seemed blasphemous. And I'm like, Todd, who the hell are you to erase Jack Kirby pencil? And so I actually it was dumb. This is how geeky I am. I actually kept those shavings in the little bag for a long time because I couldn't bear to just throw them out, because it would just be sacrilegious to sort of say, Jack Kirby's pencils, throw them in the garbage. So anyways, I sent it off, and they came back and they said, "Hey, Jack really liked it. He wants to know if you want to do another page." And I went, on one condition. On one condition. I do it on an overlay, which basically means that you put sort of like a tracing piece of paper over it, and then I ink it so I don't have to touch Jack's pencils, so I never have to erase Jack Kirby's pencils ever again. And of course they just went, Todd, whatever, we don't care. So they sent it to me. I did the overlay. There, good. My catalog guilt was saved. I sent it off, and then maybe about 3 weeks later, I get a phone call, and it's Jack Kirby's on the other line, and he goes, "Hey, Todd, Jack, I just wanted to phone you and tell you how wonderful those 2 covers were. They were great. You did a great job. And, I just, be on the lookout. I sent you a little gift, and I just want to say thanks." I'm like, oh, my gosh, thanks, Jack. Like, you didn't have to do it. Literally an hour later, ding dong, FedEx drops off a box, and I open the FedEx box, and I pull out, and he sent me back my overlay of my ink. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to keep the ink from Jack Kirby. And then I reach in, and he sent me the original pencils. And he wrote a thing on there that says, "Dear Todd, thanks for the great work. Keep it up, Jack." Right? And so I'm like, oh my God, I've got to. So of all the things that I've got, my prized possession is my original pencils of Jack Kirby that he sent back to me. And then if that wasn't enough, I reach in for a third time, and he throws in a page of Captain America inked by Barry Windsor Smith from the bicentennial Treasury edition.
Oh my
just
God.
as a throw-in. And I'm like,
wow.
Oh my God, best day. I mean, I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm a fully formed man at this point, but best day ever. I felt like I was 6 years old. So,
God, that is amazing. That's amazing. What an extraordinary.
What an awesome story.
That is so extraordinary.
Yeah, like I said, you hang around long enough. I'm getting old enough now that you get these moments where you just sort of you don't know how big they were, especially because a few years later Jack dies, right?
Right.
And so you just go, oh man, and then you go, oh, like you're there. So again, years later, I end up spending a lot of time with Stan Lee, right? Especially probably the last 10 years of his life. And, I probably been on stage with Stan more than any other human being. You know, we used to travel around and do this sort of little shtick of ours. It started from way back when they gave him some kind of almost personal premiere for Iron Man, and they did it in Vegas. Yeah. And Stan's hearing wasn't very good at that point. And somebody from his staff said, "Hey, Todd, we were wondering if you could come up and basically MC this thing." And I went, "Yeah, sure, no problem. It'd be cool, Stan Lee." Yeah. And I had met him prior to that, so again, I had some relationship with him, but not nearly what it would turn into.
Right.
And so I got up there and you know, did my thing, and Stan at the end came up and said, "Oh, thanks, Todd. It was wonderful." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, thanks, Stan." And then the next day, I run into Stan again, and he goes, "Todd, come over here, young man. Oh my God, last night you were great." And I went, "No, you said that already last night. Thanks." And he's like, "No, I didn't hear a thing you said last night." He was going deaf. So he goes, "They recorded it, and I took it up to my room, and then I was able to turn up the volume, and then I got to hear it." And he goes, "Oh my God. How would you like to come with me on the road to all the shows, and you can be the guy on stage with me?" Because he was a little bit vain at that point, didn't want to wear a hearing aid. So he needed somebody to basically decipher what was being said when you opened it up to questions and things like that.
Sure, yeah.
Not in a way that made him seem like he was deaf, right? So there was a nuance to it. And so I sort of have to do this translation and not make it look obvious that Stan couldn't hear.
Brilliant.
Later on, he ended up getting a hearing aid, and then it sort of changed his whole world. Because, like, "Stan, you dumbass, like, why didn't you get this like 5 years earlier?" But you know, so I ended up spending all that time, and then you get to that moment where he was getting pretty old and was losing a little bit of his energy, and he's probably 93 at this point. And we do, you know, a panel in Phoenix, Arizona, which happened to coincidentally be where I live. And I remember walking up on the stage that time, and he turned to me and he goes, "Todd, you do most of the talking. I just don't have the energy for this." And I never, in all the times I was with Stan, I mean, he was the most energetic human being I'd ever heard. Yeah. It took me aback when just as we're walking up on stage. Anyways, we do the interview. I thought it was low energy. It ends up being the last time Stan was ever on a stage.
Wow.
Right? He never to be on a stage ever again. So I used to do this thing where I take like selfies with them, you know, go, "Hey, everybody in the crowd, let's take a selfie here." And Stan, I don't think to this day understood what a selfie was, right? So, because he always like getting close to my camera, I'm going, "Stan, get back," because I've got some goofy ones.
Yeah, sure.
But I've got that selfie, and then somebody took one like 5 feet from us that I look at, going, "Man, again, if you knew that was going to be the last time, right? The last public sort of time that he talked." I think he did one show later, but all he did was sign, and that was it. Yeah. That he was going to talk. It would have, you know, you would have made it a bigger deal, right? It would be like, you know, sending somebody off for retirement and making sure that, and everybody that was there in attendance would have been more important if everybody knew this was the last. But you didn't, right? Nobody knew what was going to come in the future there. So, but you know, you still go, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
cool. You got to spend the last time with them.
Hey, a quick thing I want to talk about, Mike Black. I think this is something that we really should talk about, and it's a company that was founded in 1983 in Tokyo, Japan. Of course, I'm talking about the Zoom Corporation.
Zoom.
Now, if it wasn't for Zoom, and Matt knows this, we would not be able to do our show. They make the best audio equipment in the world. Which one are we using right now?
We're recording onto a Zoom LiveTrack L8 right now, and when we go do our live events at conventions and stuff, we often use the Zoom H6, and they're both just fantastic pieces of equipment. You plug your microphones in, you plug your headphones in, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I mean, whether you're a classically trained pianist or a run-and-gun film filmmaker or a podcaster like like us.
Yep.
Yeah.
I do a ton of podcasts, and I can tell by listening when they're using a Zoom and when they're not.
Yeah,
It's the mark of excellence.
It really is. Go check it. Go check out all their stuff over at zoom-na.com. That's zoom-na.com. Be professional, for God's sake. Zoom-na.com. All right. Okay, let's get back to the show.
Now, what was it like at some point in your career? You're going on. It's in the late '90s. You've been around for a while. And you spin off into Image Comics at some point. How did that come about? Like, how was it even a decision to decide that you wanted to go out and start this company on your own? Because at the time, I remember, I'm not really a comic book guy, but at the time it was big in the press in general that there was this new comic book company coming out, and it was like going to challenge Marvel and DC and what was going to happen with that. How did that sort of all come together?
So, again, for some of your listeners who aren't sort of fluent in comic books, everybody sort of knows Marvel and DC. They're the sort of the big two, right?
Right.
We're number 3, and we have been literally since our inception.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, there were a couple months there where we were number 2. We actually were ahead of DC, but we've been number 3 for since 1992, for 28 plus years.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
And so the origin of that was that when you're an artist or a creator, you have other peers and buddies that you hang out with. So a couple of my buddies were Rob Liefeld. He was an artist at Marvel at that time, and Eric Larson. And we used to just, chit chat with each other sometimes because you're trying to get through a page. So you just get them on the phone and just talk silly stuff while you're drawing, just to sort of drone away the time. And Rob was talking about doing his own book anyways. He was going to do his own book. He was going to, maybe he was going to continue doing stuff at Marvel, but he was definitely going to go do his own book. And Eric was talking about doing his own book. And at this point, I was growing somewhat disenchanted with sort of the system, and I was thinking of doing my own book. And so, what the conversation sort of morphed into over time was why are we all thinking about doing a book separate and all going off and scattered in 3 different places? People have been doing this for 30, 40 years and nobody cares, right? You get lost. You get lost in the forest. What if we all sort of quit at the same time and did our 3 books in the same place? Now, at that point, we didn't have a name yet. It wasn't called Image. But that was the onus of it, that it's like, hey, Eric, Rob, and Todd, let's just do our own books. And so we decided we were going to do that. Very quickly, Rob says, hey, I've got a buddy named Jim Valentino. I was wondering, he does independent comic books. Can he join? Yeah, sure, cool. So all of a sudden, what was an idea that began, and we were 3 of us, we said, let's do 4. The 4 of us then say, hey, you know what, it's time to go to Marvel and tell them we're quitting, right? We're going to go quit. So we fly, Rob Liefeld and I fly to New York, and we're gonna tell Marvel, and then unknown to DC, we're going to tell DC the same thing, that we're quitting and we're going to go on our own. And in a serendipitous sort of 48 hours, we're in New York. There was some kind of auction going on. I see Mark Silvestri in the corner, but Jim Lee was there. Jim Lee, at this point, for people who don't know, was sort of at the top of the game. He was the guy. He was the golden boy, and his art was staggeringly good.
He was on X-Men.
He was doing X-Men. He was doing the top book, so he was a guy. And I run into him at the auction, and he says, hey, what are you here for, Todd? And so I give him the spiel. And I can be very convincing. They'll tell you that. And I just said, hey, here's what we got. Here's what we're doing, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And in short order, much to my surprise, Jim says, hey, can I join? Right? And to me, I've said plenty of times, that was the moment. That was a big moment, because Rob and I, and Eric to some degree, but Rob and I, we were like rebels. We were the bad boys, right? And so I think the industry was like, yeah, in Marvel and DC, yeah, of course the bad boys are going to go and do their own thing. It's just what they do. But Jim was the choir boy, and Jim was the guy that was the company man. He was the sort of the face of it. And when he said yes, then I knew, like, wow, this is going to work way bigger than I thought, because it's now going to send a message that not only the rebels are going, although we were also very popular, but that Jim the top guy who was the company man was willing to go. And then Jim says, and I got my buddy Will Strataccio. I was talking to him. Is it okay if he comes with us too? And it's like, yeah. So all of a sudden we went from 4. We land in New York with 4. Eric, Rob, Jim, Valentino, and myself. That all of a sudden we pick up 5, 6.
So now you've got a murderer's row, basically.
Yeah. Oh, and then I'm going, wow, we're going to have the meeting in the morning with the publisher and editor-in-chief at Marvel. And as we walk into the lobby of the hotel I'm staying at, again, Mark Sylvester, who I'd seen at the auction, is standing in the lobby. And I went, Mark, you got a minute? And he's like, yeah, sure. And then I gave him the spiel. And I go, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what we're doing. Jim Lee just joined. Blah, blah, blah. And by the way, if you want to join, you got to give me a call at 7 in the morning because we've got a meeting at 8. Right? So, and he was like, so if I want to change my trajectory of my career, I have to tell you in the next 8 hours. yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But sure as heck, at 7 in the morning, phone rang. Mark just said, "You know what? I'll go. I'm with you." So, bam! All of a sudden, we were at 7. I'm like, wow! It just went. And to put it in perspective, so people understand, the 7 of us. The 7 people at that moment accounted for 44 of the top 50 selling books for the entire year. If you took all the sales, of all the books, 44 of the top 50 out of 5,000 books that came out that year. We were 44 of the top. So we were a murderer's row.
Yeah. Someone was going to be pissed. There's someone out there.
We go up to the Marvel and have the conversation and tell them, why we're leaving, and we're not going. As the elevator's closing at the end of that conversation, and we're getting on the elevator, the editor-in-chief, Tom DeFalco, says, I remember going, hey, if it doesn't work out, you're welcome back. I remember when it closed, that line that it closed, and it was my wife and Jim Lee and myself in there, and I remember looking at Jim going, wow, they think we're going to fail, right? I mean, it just that, and it's a guy like me who's competitive because, like I said, I played baseball.
Yeah.
I took it as damn it, no, right? And Jim Lee, again, he was going to originally be a doctor, so this is a smart human being, right? So, and what we were doing, just so everybody understands, we were going to print comic books. My dad had been in the printing business his entire life. It's ink on paper, right? It's ink on paper. It is not complicated. They want you to believe it. Corporations always want you to think that what they're doing is way more complicated, but it's ink on paper. And so I just went, oh my gosh, they're underselling us, Jim. We're I was determined I would never go back at that point because I just to say I would never humiliate myself to go, no, I got to go back. We walked across the street, and at that time in our business, if you got fired or got mad at Marvel, you went to DC. If you got fired or got mad at DC, you went to Marvel. Yeah, all you did was ping pong back and forth. That's all you did.
Sure.
So we walked over to DC, which is only a few blocks away, and they think now they hit the mother load, right?
They think you're coming in.
Oh my gosh. Jim Lee at that point had never, ever been to the DC office. I had done some work at DC, and Rob Liefeld done some work at DC. But Jim Lee, who again was the golden boy, had never even stepped, and you could just see their eyes light up. And in quick order, they had about 15, 16 of their people in a conference room, and we were all sitting there. And then we had to drop the bombshell and go, oh, by the way, we're here to tell you that we just quit Marvel. And they're like, yeah. And they're going, and we're not working for you either. Right? So you could just see
Holy
and some of them were really angry. They were angry. Because they're like, why in the hell would you come here and rub our face into it? And we weren't there, just to be clear, we weren't there to rub their face in it. What we were there was to tell them the same reasons why we had quit Marvel, and to basically say to both those companies, we're not coming back. There's nothing you can say or do that is basically going to get us to change our mind.
Yeah.
We're just giving you this information as to why we're quitting, because you may want to do something about that, because next week you may get another 7 walking in here quitting. I don't know why you want to keep bleeding your creative people, right? So why don't you take care of us a little bit better? Because, I mean, a few years earlier, I was trying to start, because I was a maniac, I was trying to start a union, but I couldn't get my brethren to sort of close rank. It was a frustrating experience. So this was sort of our mini union. We're just going to go and do it. They did. Once we left, they changed some of the things that they were doing that bettered the community. So even the people that thought we were idiots or were jealous of us, they ended up getting a better deal because of our thing.
That's cool.
But I remember when I was sitting at DC, they were sitting there going, well, Todd, I don't understand. Why don't you just come to work to DC? You know, we treat our freelancers better than Marvel, and we just came out with this contract here that was, you know, for the betterment of the community, the freelance community, and you know, and I went, yeah, let me I understand, that's very kind of you. Let me just ask you one question. When you wrote and put together this document to make the creative community better and make our lives better, at any time in this process of this document of bettering the creative community, did you ask any creative people about it? and let me tell you, I'm old enough now, a pregnant pause will get you an answer. Like, if anybody ever hesitates, then the answer, like, I knew what the answer was.
Yeah.
So it was a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Right. But again, it was like, of course you didn't. Right.
Yeah.
This is the arrogance of the companies, from my point of view at that point.
Totally.
Is that you just care about us so much that even when you do a document about us, you don't even ask one of us. Like, what would you guys like that would make it be better for you guys? Like, not one of us. It didn't have to be me or Jim or anybody in that room. It just had to be any of us, and you couldn't be bothered, right? Because you only employ 200, 300 of them each, maybe more than that, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. That was it. That was where my head was at. I couldn't take
awesome.
that mindset of how sort of unappreciated we were, given that some of us, Jim Lee and Rob and myself and Mark, we were selling a lot of books and putting a lot of money in their pockets, and we were still just a commodity to them.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was the beginning of Image, and we took off, and we each came up with our own books, and mine was Spawn, a character I'd created when I was in high school, when I was teaching myself superhero comic books, and it ended up coming out, setting a record for the most sales by an independent comic. I had
you hold Guinness Book World Records for that.
Yeah, so when I was at Marvel, I hold the record for the biggest sales by a single creator on Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
So that's in the Guinness Book, and then I essentially did the same thing once we went independent. So for the most sales by an individual creator, I own both the corporate and non-corporate version of both of those. And then,
Wow.
And then recently, to sort of age me up, Spawn got to issue 301, and it's the longest-running creator-owned book in the history of mankind. So I sort of take a pride in it being around 28 years later, and
Wow.
the person who created it is still at the steering wheel of making all the decisions.
So cool. And you've had a movie, an animated series.
I mean, we have to mention
The video game. Have you played Mortal Kombat 11 yet?
I'm not very good at it, so I usually leave that to my son and some of the people in the office. But I lent the character into the DLC release there of that one, and just told them, I've dealt with corporate, because again with my toy company, I started the toy company, and I deal with big corporations all the time with using their licenses.
I gotta say though, he fights like Spawn. Like they really did a great job, I thought.
The thing that I wanted out of it, and they delivered, was I turned to them and said, look, I'm not going to be like a corporation here. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to create a character and make them move and make them do things in your game so that somebody who knows nothing about Spawn, who's never heard of the character, who's never heard of me, doesn't know anything about Image Comics, nothing, right? They're just video game addicts and, more importantly, fans of Mortal Kombat, will play that character called Prawn or Spam or whatever they want to call him, and say, that guy's the coolest guy. That's what I need you to do. And don't worry if it matches anything that was in the comic book exclusively. Don't stop it. Don't be loyal. Make the coolest Mortal Kombat figure you can, and I'm sure there'll be enough on there that will still be recognizable as Spawn. And I thought they did it. Once they saw that to be a truism, because they started sort of stretching themselves, and then they saw I was approving everything. They're going, oh my God, Todd's letting us get crazy, and that was it. I go, if you're gonna hear any comment from me, it's that you're not pushing yourselves enough. You're not getting crazy enough. Right?
Well,
so go.
We had Keith David on the podcast, and he talked about how much Spawn meant to means to the black community as having a superhero, and just I just think it's such a brilliant character.
And he voiced him again for the game too.
Oh, he did?
So
that's so great.
Yeah, he did in the Mortal Kombat. Right. Besides the HBO, he did the voice for 3 seasons on HBO.
Yeah.
Where we won a couple of Emmys for that. He came back and Mortal Kombat hired him to do the voice on that. But here's a fact too, which is why what he said I've heard it more than once. And Jamie Foxx, who's attached to the movie that we're gonna do here, or I'll die, has said the same thing. And the reason that he has an impact is that Spawn was the first minority superhero character to have his own full-length feature.
Yeah.
6 months later, you got Blade came out.
Right.
But the first one is Spawn. And so when I talk to people, that they say the same thing. They go, Todd, you don't understand that, like, how important Spawn is. That, like, for the first time, they got to see a brother, like, in his own movie, right?
Yeah.
Like it just didn't happen. And so you may think that, like, the movie wasn't very good or whatever. It's been 20 years and whatever. But I'm telling you, Todd, like, we do this movie, Jamie Foxx always telling me, like, he goes, they're going to come. Like, we're going to come. We're going to support this thing, right? Like, it matters. And, oh, by the way, people like Spawn anyway, so it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of people, globally that will pay attention to it. So,
absolutely.
Anyway, we'll get it done.
And my God, dude, that Kickstarter, holy mother of God, to watch when you first put the pictures out of that figure and what he was going to look like and stuff. I remember saying oh God, like, of course you have to buy into this. You got to get it. You got to get it. And then you see the number start popping up, and then it hits $1 million in people of putting $1 million in, and you're like, $1 million, like for wow, like that is wow. We're in an amazing place. Like when HasLab did their Jabba's sail barge, they had 5,000 people put in $500 a piece, and I remember that being like a big deal. But you guys had 3.5 million, 3.6 million, somewhere in there.
Like that, yeah.
I mean, that is extraordinary. Like, it's insane.
I mean, like, again, I'd never done a crowdfunding thing, so we were just doing it just to collect data. The comic book industry had got shut down. That number, again, was in the middle of the pandemic. We're in the middle of it, but I mean, the country was getting shut down, right?
Yeah.
So comic books, they had stopped printing, and we weren't doing any new comic books, and things were sitting there. I'd been talking about doing a Kickstarter for a while, just because I'd sold my toys almost everywhere. I'd never tried this, so it was just sort of I had a curiosity about crowdfunding. Yeah. And I was at the point where I go, we got to engage the fans somehow, because we just shut off TV. They're not making any more TV shows. They're not making any new movies. They're not making any new comic books. Like we can't just wait for this to get settled, this thing called COVID, because nobody knows when it's going to happen. And that was even at the beginning when people were talking about it being in months. I didn't know that to be true. I go, maybe it will be months. How do we know it won't be a year or two, right? Like we can't do nothing. So let's just engage them a little bit. And so I think that I needed to hit like 100,000 to make it work. We hit that like in 5 minutes.
Oh my God!
And then the million hit in like 26 hours or something. I'm like, what? What do you like? I thought if we got, in all honesty, and I say this with complete sincerity, I thought if we got to 500,000, that would have been a home run. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been dancing naked at that moment. and all of a sudden, I wake up the next day and I'm like, what are we talking? Like, what are we doing? And then you get. It's this weird formula somebody had told me. It's like you get a third at the beginning, a third in the middle, and then a third at the end. So we got the million, and then they were talking about you can get to $1.5 million. I'm like, no way, we're not going to get to $1.5 million. And then eventually we sort of got to like 2-ish or something, and then 2 or 3 days before the end of it, we're sitting at just barely over 2, and then all of a sudden, I guess there's a bunch of procrastinators on that site.
I was one of those.
And it makes sense because what happens along the way, I kept adding stuff,
right?
So the people at the end can say, hey. Okay, I was on the fence at $40 when it was at the beginning, but now he's added 10 new things to it. Yeah, sure, I'm in. And then it literally at the end started spinning as fast as it did at the beginning of it. So you end up with, I mean, we were hours away and we were talking about, man, can we hit 3? And it went to 3.5. Like, whoa! I didn't even have anything I could add in the next 500,000 because it went so fast. Awesome. It went that quick. So
I mean, your toys are incredible, and the work that you've done at McFarlane Toys they're just phenomenal toys. I mean, Mike Black.
I collect a bunch of your stuff, the Walking Dead stuff, the Mortal Kombat ones. I just got the Mortal Kombat Spawn with the sword that has the Spawn symbol on it. It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. And now I know you've been doing a lot of work for DC, and that's all been popping up. So we got to talk about the toys that you're doing for DC as well as just the work that you've been doing over there. What's that been like?
So it's officially called DC Multiverse. So that's what's on the packages. Look, I was going to Toy Fair for 25 years because I've been in the business that long, and I felt a little bit, out of place. Because I go, man, every single person in here has either a piece of Marvel or DC except for me, right? Like I didn't even know you could skin those licenses as thin as you could. I didn't know that ceiling fan chains with logos on it was a thing, right? but I go, wow. And so, but eventually the opportunity came up for us to get a crack at doing one of, the big two, Marvel. From a guy making toys, and the 3 are Marvel, DC, and Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
I've always said, come on, just let me do one figure in each one of those. Just let me do one, right? Just so I can say that I did it, and I can walk away, and I can sort of be a happy toy maker. But we ended up, Mattel was doing both the sort of the mainstream toys and the collectible stuff, and then they decided that they wanted to break that up and have it to be 2 different people that were maybe a little bit more experienced in each one of those places instead of one person trying to do both. So they hired a company, Spin Master, to do the sort of the mass, stuff that
more kid oriented sort of.
And then they said, hey, Todd, you come in here and sort of do the sexy, right?
Yeah.
And so at the beginning, there was, a little bit of walking before we run, if you will, of, having conversation about what we can and can't do and how far can we push it and whatever else. And so I thought that first wave, and we all agreed there was a little bit of overlap with what Spin Master was doing.
Yeah.
And I not that I've ever spoken to them, but I we've had this conversation now where it's, given that our toys are right next to Spin Master, why do we want them why are we even picking the same looks?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
I think we're sort of now all on the same page of just saying, hey, let Spin Master do their cool stuff, basically classic DC stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'll just do some of the crazy stuff, right? Some of the super cool stuff that nobody's done, right? Versions of costumes and characters and iterations of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, all the big names that haven't been made yet.
Yeah.
And let me put those out so that when they're in the same aisle with the Spin Master DC Multiverse figures, then they have their thing and we have ours, and then you just let the consumer sort of pick what makes sense for them and their family. So that's it. And then I think the other day I did a teaser on Instagram of a couple figures that are coming out just to show people how sexy these toys can be. So they've, I applaud Warner Brothers, who owns DC, that they've, started to give me a lot more leash to basically go, okay, Todd, we get what you're trying to do now, and we see that people want you to do that sort of detailed stuff that you're known for. So go ahead and go with it. So,
Okay.
so now I'm basically, I keep telling people, like, what if you liked anything that we put out at the beginning? Shoot, but we're just getting warmed up, right? I mean, it's just because I know it's coming down the pipeline, and we're cutting loose. We're getting the cut loose now. So.
Okay, so if you had a crack to do one Star Wars and one Marvel character, who would they be?
Star Wars would probably be Darth Vader, just because I with the cape, I'm sort of fond of capes, and got enough detail on them and a little bit of body language. Obviously there's been lots and lots and lots of people who've done good versions of it since I started breaking in to the business. So I don't know that it would be that much radically different, but if I only could do one, I'd start with a classic character like that. And then
from Marvel.
Marvel, if I could only do one, wow.
Can I guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Alpha Flight.
Canadians. I do have a soft spot
Canadians.
for Alpha Flight as a Canadian superhero team, and I like that little guy Puck. So
Puck.
You're right.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Probably, I think the one that we would do the coolest version of would be a guy like Thor, because I just think that he's got a lot of stuff on him. He's got a cape, he's got long hair, he's got feathers, he's got a helmet, he's got armor, he's got weapons, so there's a lot you can play with on a character like that.
That's very close to what I thought you were going to say, which would have been Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange, yeah, he'd be like sometimes you get more sort of interest from the fans when you do quote unquote obscure characters or not the A characters, the AAA plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you like let's go back to DC Multiverse. Our first wave, the two toys that sold the most was Batman in armor and Superman in armor. There's a more specific name, but again, I'll just be generic for people who don't know and don't read comic books. But essentially, they're the two biggest versions, the most plastic I can put in a package, right?
Yeah.
And I've told people before, and the people I license with, if you give nothing but a ton of plastic to people, I've never had that toy ever back up or not sell, ever. It's people understand when you give them twice as much plastic for the same exact price.
Well, that goes back to Malabulgia.
Right. Right.
I loved that figure. We basically bribed a lady at Target to go in the back and find it for us when I was a kid.
So that figure, to go back, was a figure that we were selling our toys for like $5.99, I think, at that point.
Yeah. And
all of them were about 6 inches tall, and we made that Malbolgia figure, which is sort of like the demon from hell. We made him. If you stood him up, was probably 12 to 14 inches tall. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was giant. It wasn't.
Massive.
We had to fold them and articulate them and get them all the way down, and it was.
And he still took up the whole package.
Oh, and my CFO said, "Todd, you understand you're going to lose $1 on each one of these," and I'm like, "Let's do it."
We'll make it up in volume.
Because you spend money on advertising, right? So that's already money that you got to put off the side. I took that dollar that I was going to lose on every one of those figures as advertising, because we're now 25 years later and you still remember that figure. Why? Because it was massive. It was massive for the same price, right? And that was those are the things sometimes you have to do to just, you have to get street cred. And if getting street cred means that you lose money on that one play, if it works, you'll get it back in the future.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I just go, let's just spend it now. If it works, we'll do it. And plus you get to have these great lines where you go, my Malbolgia craps as tall as their figure. Right? So you get to have fun, and it worked, and people still bring up that figure as being a moment where they just went, what? This guy's crazy. He's going to give us all this for that price.
Hey, real quick before we continue the show, I want to talk about a third-generation, family-run business that I am very proud to be working with. Sennheiser is the top tier microphone company in the world, and we are so lucky that we are now recording our show using Sennheiser microphones and their headphones. It's awesome.
We're talking into Sennheiser MD42 microphones and using Sennheiser HD25 headphones, and these sound amazing.
I mean, listen to Mike Black's voice.
Listen to the rich and sumptuous soundscape that comes out of my voice.
Oh.
Every time I speak into a Sennheiser.
Absolutely. Go check out their microphones and their sound equipment over at Sennheiser.com. All right, let's get back to the show.
Now I have a request, because you do make some Major League Baseball figures, and as a Redhead and a Dodger fan, is there any chance of us seeing a Justin Turner come from you someday?
He's cool because he's got that beard and he just looks like a dude, right?
Yeah.
So some of the players, and I'd apply this to movies and TV shows we've done of actual, people. The more character that they have about them, I think the cooler the figures turn out. I've found that historically the toughest athletes, celebrities to make figures of are the ones that are like super handsome or super beautiful. They're almost flawless human beings. And there's nothing when you're sculpting there's not, like, you can't grab onto anything, right? Where when you do a figure of somebody who's got a beard, or like they're a little bit overweight, or they're older, so they got wrinkles, or they got a big nose, I don't know, just anything that just sort of makes it them is easier. And so a guy like Justin Turner, because he just is fun to look at, would make a fun toy too, because he's fun to look at.
That's not a no. That's good. I'll take it.
All right.
and speaking
Matt,
of baseball, I do have to ask you about this, because you're featured in an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary that just came out about the home run chase between McGwire and Sosa in that era, and you were sort of a part of that, in that you were going around scooping up the baseballs that these guys were hitting, and then and you had this collection of baseballs. How did you sort of decide, hey, I want to be the guy that's going out and getting all these baseballs? I mean, obviously you're a baseball fan and somebody who played the game, but like, did you have a big collection of memorabilia that you were adding to, or was this sort of like just became your thing?
No, two things. One, I have a brother, you're younger, brother, you're older. So whenever you can have stuff cooler than them, you always make sure that you go after it. So I knew that they were following the big national story of the McGwire Sosa, just like everybody else was. So I started asking the question literally when the season was over, like, where's that ball? But here's why I bought it. Like, this is the sole big reason why I bought it. There are a couple things that people will tell you in life that are actually truisms, and one of them is stick to what you know. And so I only know a couple things. I know sports, and I know comic books, and then after that I got to start talking about the weather. I run out of stuff very quickly. I was in the toy business, and I was trying to make sports figures, and I couldn't even get them to answer my phone. And so they were like, why? Because I was a nobody. They shouldn't have answered it. And so I needed to grab their attention. And to me, this was, besides it was a hell of a story, it was a national story.
Mm-hmm.
It was a way for me to grab attention so that I could then reuse that attention in a different way. And so I ended up buying the baseball at a stupid price at an auction because me and another guy got into some bidding war and it got to some dumb number.
Yeah.
But then it became big news, and I was traveling around the country doing a bunch of, a lot of news. And at some point, then those phone calls then got answered, and were for the sports companies, and they saw the headlines, and they just basically did what I was hoping they would do, which is, oh my God, this guy's got so much money, he can wipe his ass with that much to go get a baseball. He must be a sports enthusiast to do that, and B, he must be a successful businessman to have that kind of money. Now, just so everybody knows, I begged, borrowed, and stole every red cent I could, which is why I didn't want to pay that much. Which is why it bugged me. That guy was bidding, and I was like, ugh. But in short order, after that, after we made sort of the splash with the news, it was us or whatever, then it was myself, that we signed the deal with the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, and the NHL. And I was hoping I'd get one of them. I got all four major sports to make toys. I did it for 10, 15, 20 years, and I made that money back that I spent on that ball multiple times over, right? I keep saying to people, it was just buying those balls was just my ante to the poker game with these big boys. And so people want to talk about that one hand that I was playing, which was buy the ball, and are you going to ever get your money back? You got to pull the camera back further and the microscope back further than that. That wasn't the game plan. The game plan was, and I literally, to use another poker sort of analogy, I pushed in all my chips because I didn't have any more money left. Yeah. If it didn't work, I was in trouble. Yeah. But it ended up working the way that I wanted. And then not only did I get those four major sports, but then that notoriety then led that we started picking up TV and movie licensing toys. And I've been doing it for 25, 30 years, selling it, Target, Toys R Us, and Walmart, and whatever, Kmart when they were still around, for all those years. So
and if all this leads to me having a Justin Turner sculpture on my shelf made by Todd McFarlane Toys, then I say your money is well worth it.
Absolutely.
Money well spent.
The thing that's interesting is if you spend $4 million on a 30-second Super Bowl ad, right? Yeah. People talk about it for a month, and then you're out, right?
Yeah.
And here it was, a few days ago, you guys mentioned they did the 30 and 30. That's almost 22 years after the fact.
Yeah, and they're still talking about it.
And they're still talking about it. So besides I've already got my money back multiple times over from the profits of selling the toys. They're still talking about it, so you still get to amortize it, right? Because I was doing an interview with one group, I think TMZ or somebody, and they were trying to go, well, Todd, it's $3 million, only worth maybe $1 million. We talked to experts, only worth $1 million and whatever else, and it's like you feel foolish and whatever, and it's like, dude, we're 22 years into it, and you're giving me live hookup on TMZ, and yesterday you gave me a whole article on how the balls aren't worth anything. In real life, that would have cost me a minimum of $200,000, and to get 5 minutes on national TV, which ESPN just gave me, I just got an extra $500,000 worth of free for you guys to talk about how dumb I am. Please keep talking about how dumb I am and keep giving me that free advertising, because advertising on a national level is expensive.
In terms of ongoing baseball money stories, the only two I can think of are you with the baseballs and Bobby Bonilla making his $1 million a year from the Mets. Those are the only two that are ongoing where people talk about him for years.
It's totally true.
Bobby Bonilla. Bobby Bonilla was a Spawn fan, too.
Oh,
FYI.
Well, good. I always liked Bobby Bonilla back on the Pirates back in the day. Good. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got just a couple quick questions that are quick questions from fans.
From the internet.
From the internet. These are questions from the internet.
The good people of the internet.
From our one of our friends, Mario Delgado, he asked, what is your favorite character to draw that is not a superhero?
Wow. I'm It's weird because I would call myself a lazy artist, right? And a lazy artist means that I don't do a lot of drawing that doesn't get published, right? Like I know people have like big sketchbooks, and I'm like, if I'm going to draw, shoot, I'm gonna get a page print. Right? I'm too pragmatic, so I don't do non-comic book stuff.
Well, then let's take it this way.
Like a character in a comic book.
Like supporting character, like J. Jonah Jameson.
That's what I think what we're talking about, yeah.
I see. Who do I like to draw that's not a superhero in the books?
Yeah.
Probably my favorite was maybe Mary Jane Watson.
Yeah.
At that point was married to Peter Parker. And part of that was because when I took over the book, Amazing Spider-Man, years ago, I thought she was in a bit of a funk. She was a supermodel, but they still had her buying clothes at Kmart, right? It was weird.
And she still had like a 50s haircut.
I was able to add the glam to her that hadn't been there for a while.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden people went, oh my God, look at how sexy she looked. It was like, she was a supermodel. That was her job. I don't know why she didn't have her curling iron, right? So I gave her a curling iron and makeup, and a wardrobe. So, yeah, she was fun to draw.
Okay, from Eric Marino, he asked, which members of Infinity Inc. was your favorite to draw?
Wow, he's going way back in the time machine. That was the first monthly comic book I ever did, and when I got that job, it pained me enough that I was able to get on my knee and propose to my wife. So
wow, that's cool.
I started dating her when she was 13, I was 16, so we've had a good long life together.
Amazing.
There's a character in there called Obsidian, and he's got dark colors. I like dark colors, and he's got a big cape on him, so he's got a little bit of a cool sort of Spawn vibe in blue. So.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Very similar look.
Here's a question from our friend Kipper. He wrote in and said, it's a well-known fact that fellow Image comic founder Rob Liefeld has trouble drawing feet. Is there any other slightly lesser known quirks about in the artist and creator community? Anything that you guys kind of maybe tease each other about?
You know what? I think we all understand our own weaknesses. I've got plenty of them, right? My anatomy's not very good. It probably was a thing that helped on Spider-Man, that when he became Spider-Man, I didn't care about anatomy. At first people would go, Todd, the human body can't go like that. And I'm like, yeah, but look how cool it is, though, right?
Yeah.
Looks super cool, right? And again, we're just doing big fantasy stuff. We don't do that. We had a saying when we broke into comic books. One of the first things I got taught was, if in doubt, black it out, right? And what that essentially meant was, if you don't know how to draw it, hide it, right? Hide it. So the blackout meant like put a shadow over it, but it also meant if you can't draw feet, make sure they're standing in grass all the time. If you can't draw hands, make sure they're holding a bowling ball or something. Like, you always make sure you stay away from your weaknesses. So, and we all have them. So, Rob has got chided more than he probably deserves.
I know. He's a brilliant.
Well, he got
artist.
a lot about putting so many pouches on characters.
Oh, yeah.
And then he finally released on Instagram a character called Pouch Man that was just all pouches.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
Oh, yeah, it's super cool.
Oh,
well, I mean, remember earlier in this conversation, I was saying you got to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Rob Liefeld, I think, is a glowing example of somebody who he'd be the first to admit isn't the greatest artist. But that dude is a hustler.
Yeah.
He has gotten more mileage out of his skills than other people. He has gotten further in his career than arguably he should, compared to, and myself included, because I don't consider myself that good of an artist. When I look at the talent that's out there, but they just don't want to hustle. Rob and I hustle, right?
Yeah.
We just go, all right, if you guys don't want to bust, then we'll bust it, right? So this is it. This is the piece where it's like, shame on you guys, because you guys actually draw and gals draw better than us, but you don't want to basically put in the hard work of the hustle and doing the pages and doing some of the other stuff that gets you to where we're at. You want you want sort of the notoriety, but you don't want to basically sort of dig the hole, as deep as we've dug it, because that's manual labor. So good on Rob. I'm quite proud of him.
I know we're big fans of him too. Brian Rowe and Rob Eves, both Rob Eves from who's in Norway. Both guys asked the same question, which is Clown Man based off of of any human being? Is it based off of a real person?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right. No. I knew that I was going to have the Violator was going to be this big gnarly guy, and I wanted something that was the complete opposite of it. So I go, hey, what if I just do the little fat, out of shape guy who jokes all the time, so he'll seem to be the least threatening guy that will be on the page, and then all of a sudden, it's sort of like the Hulk.
Yeah.
If you get him sort of mad, then all of a sudden, then he turns into sort of this formidable character. I mean, I recently have evolved the clown so that he's now 6'2", and he sort of looks more like Kingpin or something like that. So that, because I wanted to take away the silliness of him and make him way more formidable even when he's not the Violator. But no, I'm not making fun of anybody there. Although there are a few people I could Photoshop and get close to it.
All right, and then the last question that we'll ask from our fan people out here is from the Play With It podcast show. They asked, is there a possibility of in the future of doing another Kickstarter figure, and who would it be? Who do you think it might be?
I'll do another one. Again, I don't know if I'll necessarily do Kickstarter or go to another crowdfunding or just do it on spawn.com itself. And we've had the conversation because my eyes have been opened up to there's a lot of possibilities, right? You can do like little tiny figures that then swap out for your Dungeons and Dragons, and I could do board games. We're talking about board games now that I think would be a big winner because that seems to work. And then, we'll talk about like bringing back like our dragons figures and maybe Tortured Souls and Movie Maniac, some of the stuff that put us on the map early.
Yeah.
But my guess is that the next one will be probably like Medieval Spawn. And the reason I say that is because I can make pieces of him out of metal, and I can give him like 4 or 5 helmets, and I can even make one hinged so that you can see inside, and I could give him like 5 shields and 4 swords and maces and axes, and it just seems like there's a lot of fun. And then all the detail I can put, maybe interchangeable chest plates and stuff like that. There's a lot I could do with that character that isn't necessarily there with a character like Spawn.
I'm already pre-ordering it.
Although I was talking to J. Scott Campbell. I don't know if you know his artwork. He does the Pretty Lady stuff, and he did this 2-page spread for me in issue 300 of Spawn of She Spawn with this big motorcycle.
Oh yeah.
So he phoned me the other day, going, Todd, what are we doing? We're gonna do She Spawn with the motorcycle Kickstarter, right? So that one would just look badass.
Well, I was going to say, if you do the Medieval Spawn, would you do the horse as well?
We've talked about it. The problem is that it adds a cost of which maybe the horse, like if you say to people, hey, would you rather add an extra $20 and get the horse, or would you rather add an extra $5 and get like 100 different extra pieces, right?
Yeah.
My guess is that people go, I could live without the horse for now. Right? They just want a bunch of cool stuff to go with their guy. So especially if I can figure out how to do interchangeable armor and stuff like that, gauntlets and gloves and boots and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I think that would be a little
really
more
cool.
A little more fun.
Awesome. Well, I gotta say, Todd McFarlane. I've been a fan of you my whole life, and it is an unbelievable honor to be able to get to chat with you today. So thank you again so much for doing this. How can people find you on the social media? Do you want to tell them your Instagram and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do. I think we're on the obvious places: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and then put up a bunch of stuff on Spawn.com. So I think you just type in my name and you get there fairly quickly on any of those social places. So
cool, awesome. Mike Black, where can people find you?
At Mike Black Attack on all social media.
Oh yeah, and you got to see some of the toy pictures and stuff that you've been posting.
I just did a Spawn one with the Mortal Kombat Spawn.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. And Matt Walker, where can people find you?
Links to everything at funnymatt.com, or if you're a San Francisco Giants fan, you can let me know at mattwalkersucks.com.
That's true. That's a real website. And you can always get me at Stephen Glickman, Stephen Glickman on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Don't forget to subscribe to the Nighttime Show podcast. Thank you so much, Todd McFarlane. You are a fucking legend.
All right. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
You.
Appreciate your time.
See you soon.
Yeah.